Continuing around and beyond the next hill, we found ourselves descending amidst trees heavily laden with fruit, trampling flat the grass, the gurgling of irrigation channels surrounding us, and you delighted by the unexpected richness of it all. I remember you in bright sunlight, in the resplendent light of orchards. But I have more than just memories of you. We had a daughter. I had a daughter. I had a daughter who had assumed a grave air, as though she believed by intense concentration she would dispel the source of her confusion through an act of will. The child, the very image of the mother, throwing her head back to laugh, the very image of you. Eventually I found myself back in the world, back at my place of work, the curatorship of other memories. I found myself back at my desk in the library, a library of 900,000 books. In the course of a day, happening to discover that the Elizabethan John Dee believed the correct mathematical formula would summon an angel. The temperature in Lisbon, on an April morning in 1900. That the only calligraphic link between ancient China and the present is the character for child. And one day a bound volume on my desk, a 19th century edition of Don Quixote, a bequest made by an Argentine scholar. Turning the familiar pages with bored appreciation, I came across a new title page, The Enigma of Ulysses, then 7 pages in a script which I failed to decipher, but which struck me as archaic in origin. Appearing at random intervals and nestling uncomfortably between the elegant characters were words in Latin forming the dictum, "History is the mother of truth." Bewildered, continuing to turn the now blank pages, I became aware of a rustling as though of pages agitated by a rising wind. Then a sense of vertigo as the rustling became a gentle murmur of voices, slowly growing louder. One voice separated itself from the rest, unpracticed, guttural and harsh, as if from non-use. The voice warmed, gradually assuming the distinct outline of speech, and I began to make out the odd word or phrase. Someone was speaking of the love for a cousin. I felt I could not move. Without ceasing, the voice was swept away in a discordant chorus, a tremendous assembly of languages. Another emerged. A woman was recalling, many years after the event, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand in June of 1914 in Sarajevo. She'd been standing in the crowd with the man who would later become her husband. I slammed the book shut, feeling as if I'd been cast adrift. I sank and swam in an unfamiliar sea. On looking up, I saw it was dark. Hours had passed. I spent a sleepless night fearing for my sanity. On returning the next day filled with dread and hope, I found the book still on my desk awaiting me. Multitudes of voices from across the centuries assailed me. They told of everyday events or small passions. From time to time I would be ushered into the weightless sphere of myth, of history. I stood with the foot soldiers smitten by the shining glance of Helen, Queen of Sparta, the beauty who brought a rich and noble country to a shameful end. Listened to the tale of his futile search for an echo of her in the faces and gestures of the women he encountered ever after. I felt his anguish at the knowledge that he was not unique in this, merely one of the legions who fell before her. Heard him dying alone, an anonymous and diverse Paris, with the image of her obscure in his memory. In the weeks that followed, I neglected my work and the child, avoided contact with the other librarians, and spoke of the book to no one. If I slept, I would dream that the book was a river in flood, a street corner I had passed as a youth, the sensation of falling. I speculated that perhaps I was serving an apprenticeship. Perhaps in time I would also begin to see images on the page. An immigrant at Ellis Island, trying to make sense of a new language. Dante, blind with love, singing Beatrice Portinari for the first time. Cloud formations over West Sumatra. I realize now that I vainly hoped to hear your voice, see your face. Dust mingled with smoke spreads wings to the sky, earth and her name on nothing. hearing hopes like my own, fears like my own, patterns familiar to every man, I recognized myself in countless voices, recognized how we all move forward along a noiseless path to an unknown end, how every lust men feel can be called love. They're the same except in their endings. I felt overwhelmed by the vain gloriousness of these lives and my own, and the lives still to come. I began to suspect that the myriad voices belonged to the previous readers of the book, and that one day my voice would speak with the same wonder and lust from its depths. The notion that I too would be consumed by the book filled me with horror. One day the child spoke to me. I told her to speak up. I remember my irritation as she mumbled again. She burst into tears. I realized I could not hear her, only the sound of voices merging into, re-emerging from an infinite sea of recollection. I understood then that the book was monstrous. What good did it do me to think that I, who looked upon the volume with my eyes, who held it in my hands, was any less monstrous? I rushed to the library and, ignoring the greetings of colleagues, placed the book on one of the numerous trolleys in the building's furthermost recess. I walked away, not wishing to know its destination. Returning home, I fell into a feverish sleep, convinced that I would never again apprehend the world outside of the world of the book. In my mind's eye I see it all. The long book-lined corridor, the fluorescent lights, the heaviness of time that one finds in such places, the sound of pages being turned as though troubled by a rising wind. I remember my attempt to decipher a mystery, and my failure to do so. What I see clearly is the expression on my own face. Somewhere in the book resides, or will reside, my last words, the pronouncement of my death, the spoken memories of my grieving daughter and an unseen woman. Somewhere in the book is the true silence which is the destiny of each of us. The murmur of the child's voice slowly growing louder. In the days that followed, she would constantly be checking for my presence. I'd turn around and she'd be standing there silently, trying to comprehend the meaning of my words, my assurances, my expression. Dust mingled with smoke spreads wings to the sky, but you would surface. The scent of you remaining in the sheets after you'd risen in the morning. The way you would always swing your legs whilst reading, the heels of your sandals clacking against the tiles. Throwing your head back to laugh, the light on your throat. How were we to know what the passing of a coin from one hand to another would come to mean? You standing beside your car, the small charity of your smile, charmed by the way I was unable to meet your gaze. Within its depths I saw and gathered, bound by love, the scattered leaves of all the universe. Do you recall? Once we were walking together along the coast of a dry land, everything arid, the salt on our skins. We found ourselves descending amidst trees heavily laden with fruit, trampling flat the grass, and you delighted by the unexpected richness of it all. I remember you in bright sunlight, in the resplendent light of orchards. But I carry more than just memories of you. We have a daughter. I have a daughter. The child, the very image of her mother, throwing her head back to laugh. The very image of you. One day, perhaps, another life with its assembly of gestures and looks, a gathering up of concerns. In time, another life, similar in every detail, the only difference, the sunrise on a particular morning, a hand bearing a variable ring. Somewhere in the book resides, or will reside, our first and last words, the first time lost in the blindness of love, the last greeting of a friend. Somewhere in the book, a woman asks for a coin, or innumerable women ask for an infinite coin. Somewhere in the book is the true silence which is the destiny of each of us, but it is not my concern now. In my mind's eye I see it all. The child's face at the window, the house, the trees outside, their branches, the remaining leaves. Perhaps the leaves were a mosaic. Perhaps the leaves were golden.